All right, so today I'm making a video for you to teach you how to use the VAERS database. So VAERS database is the vaccine adverse events recording system. So every time somebody gets a vaccine and they have an adverse event, which is a reaction and not a positive reaction, sometimes that reaction can include death, but it can be a stroke, it can be a seizure, it can be a miscarriage. It can be all sorts of things. But when somebody gets one of these vaccines and they do have one of these reactions, it's entered, not always, but it's supposed to be entered in this database. Harvard, I think it was Harvard did a report actually, and it said only about 1% of adverse vaccine reactions are entered into this database. And one of the reasons is a lot of doctors don't want a record that they administered a vaccine and one of their patients had a reaction. So that's one of the reasons. There are other reasons too. I don't know all the reasons. But this is a very useful resource. And a lot of people today, they're wondering, hey, should I get the COVID vaccine? Should I get a flu vaccine? Should I vaccinate my kids? And that choice is totally up to you. And it's always a good idea to arm yourself with due diligence before you go and do something that doesn't have a liability. What I mean is, if you do have one of these adverse reactions, the pharmaceutical company, the company that made the vaccine, has zero liability, even for death. People do get a payout, and we will take a look at that. Actually, to date, $4.5 billion has been paid out since, I think, 1986 or 1988. $4.5 billion has been paid out for people that have had some kind of a life debilitating reaction or even death as well. So let's get started here, but I'm just going to show you a couple different data sets. Today we're just going to look at the COVID vaccine because that's on top of a lot of people's minds. A lot of people are just kind of wondering, hey, should I get this? And I just want to highlight something. This is still an experimental vaccine. It's an mRNA vaccine, which is a first of its kind. The controlled trials don't finish, I think, until 2022 for both Moderna and Pfizer. So those are the two COVID vaccines available in the United States. This database we're looking at only looks at reactions that have happened in the United States. So different countries have their own database. I don't know if every country has a database, but I would imagine, Canada has a database. I would think Europe has a database, the UK, Australia. So I don't know about those databases. I live in the US, so this is the one I know. But what we want to do is we go to wonder.cdc.gov and then scroll down here, click on Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting. And I'll put a link under the video if you just want to go and check this out yourself. So that takes us to the reporting system. First thing we need to do is they do have a disclaimer. Says a few things, but you have to click agree that you've read the disclaimer. So, for example, VAERS data are limited to vaccine adverse events reports received between 1990 and the most recent search date. VAERS data do not represent all known safety information for a vaccine and should be interpreted in the context of other scientific information. So I agree. And what we want to do is we want to go up here and click on Request Form. So this technology, it's pretty outdated, but it does work. So what we're going to do is if we click any of these boxes down here, for symptoms box, we need to select VAERS ID. Then we can look at different sets of information. So let's break it down. For this search, we'll do age. We will do sex. And we'll do vaccine. And then we're going to click this box here under optional measures, adverse event description. So the adverse event, that's the reaction that happened after the person got the vaccine. So just a disclaimer, it may have been from something else, but these events happened after the vaccine. So do with that what you will. Next, we'll go down to select symptoms. And we're going to leave this blank, but let's say, for example, you were thinking about getting a flu vaccine, and there's only one box for, or only one row we can choose for COVID vaccine. But if you look at flu, for example, there's a whole bunch. So maybe you want to kind of figure out, okay, which is the safest flu vaccine to get, because I'm a little prone to, or maybe, for example, let's say you're prone to seizures. So you can go here and you can just search out seizures. Let's click search. And then, so these are all the different kinds of seizures. And if you wanted to select more than one, you just hold down Control, and then you could search only for these specific symptoms. So for now, we're just going to do all symptoms. We'll come back, actually, we'll search out some specific symptoms. But first, let's go through vaccine manufacturer. Right now for the COVID vaccine, like I mentioned, the only options for the COVID vaccine are the Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech. So we're not going to select that. Section 4 is select location, age, and gender. So we're going to do the United States. We're going to do all ages. We're going to do all genders, male and female. We'll do a quick search looking at all events first, just to see how many events have been entered so far for this vaccine. And that's going to be too big for us to actually look at the data. But then we'll come back and we'll narrow it down so we can get a smaller data set, and we'll take a closer look at that. So you can get really specific onset of interval, days they spent in the hospital. We're just going to leave this on default. You can search for specific text within the fields. So, for example, current illness. Let's say maybe you have diabetes. So if you have diabetes and you want to see, okay, you can kind of narrow it down to your age group and your demographic to get a good idea of, okay, am I at risk here? Have a lot of people had an adverse effect that have my set of symptoms, or is it pretty rare? Section 7, we're going to select the report completed date. So for this vaccine, they started making it available for the public in December 2020. So we're going to select that. And the data is only available through January 2021. So as of the date of this recording, this is February 11th. We don't have the February data yet, so we're just going to look at 2 months. Report received, we're going to leave that on the default. Selected vaccination dates, we're going to see that in our data that we're going to pull up. Select adverse event onset dates, we'll leave that on the default. All this other stuff we'll just leave on the default. Then we click down here on send to process our request. So right now it's pulling the data from the database. So the maximum rows we can get for a data set is 10,000. So far for this vaccine, I believe there's been about 60 million doses so far. So there's been 44,467 reactions that have been entered into the database so far. Just to give you an idea. So let's go back, let's narrow this down some more. Let's say, for example, let's say you are pregnant and you want to know, hey, okay, is it a good idea for me to get this vaccine? Are there any risk of, say, miscarriage? So let's clear this. Oops. Got to go to search. Okay. So let's go to search. And we'll type in miscarriage. I'm going to click on search. Okay, so we're highlighting this, and we're gonna leave everything else the same, so we can just click send anywhere. So let's click send. Okay, not a lot. There have been six miscarriages so far. So you can go here. You can read the description. I suffered a miscarriage on December 31, 2020. I was at 5 weeks gestation. This was my first pregnancy. Had uterine bleeding and abdominal cramps on December 31, so the same day, and underwent evaluation by my obstetrician and was diagnosed with a miscarriage after ultrasound. Another one, patient was pregnant while taking BNT. This is the like the number code for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Got a single dose, right arm, medical history, sleep apnea, no concomitant medications. Patient did not receive any other vaccines within 4 weeks prior to the COVID vaccine. Let's just kind of scan here. Was four weeks pregnant at the onset of event. Was due to deliver September 7, 2021. The pregnancy resulted in spontaneous abortion. So, you know, if you are pregnant, there is a risk. There could have been other factors involved, but there's definitely risk. Let's look at one more. Let's look at like anaphylactic shock, because that's another kind of common one. Let's search that. So anaphylactic reaction, select that, and then we'll search on this. Let's see, so 133 events. So not a lot, but this person, 11 minutes after receiving the vaccine, complained of shortness of breath, tingling in arms and hands, numbness and tingling in legs and feet, and was observably shaking. No complaints of swelling in throat or other signs of anaphylaxis. Was brought to the ER. Patient was treated for an acute anaphylactic reaction with clear lungs and given an EpiPen shot in the right thigh. After treatment, patient found to be stable and was discharged and went home. So we can see this was female between 50 and 59. So not a ton of anaphylactic shocks, but there have been a few. So now let's go through. Now let's look at some more specific things. So we're going to choose all symptoms, and I'm going to keep it on the COVID vaccine. And also, if you're not aware of how many vaccines there are, this should be pretty eye-opening. There are a lot of different vaccines. Now, most of these are being administered to kids. For the adult vaccines, that's mostly for flu vaccine, COVID. What's another big one? Like shingles is another one. So down here, let's search for death. People that have died from the vaccine. All right, so 448 total deaths so far from the vaccine. I did this very same search about 2 weeks ago, and there were about 220, 230 or so when I did the search the first time. So it's doubled. So doctors and people have entered additional events that have happened during this time period. So there's 448. You can go through. You can see the age group, male or female, which vaccine they had. So as the data sets get bigger, it's a little harder to scroll through all this. Something else I want to point out: you can look at the entry of the database entry with more details. So as you can see, a lot of people that are dying from this are more than 65 years old. This was a female that was between 30 and 39. So we can click on this. We can look at the specific event details. So this was a 39-year-old female in Ohio. She got the vaccine on December 29, and on 1/3 she had an onset of symptoms. Let's see, did she have? So no comorbidities, wasn't on any medications. The Pfizer vaccine clinic conducted this vaccine in 12/29, received a call indicating that a staff member deceased somewhere between January 3 and January 4. Cause of death is unknown and an autopsy is being performed. So this was a relatively young woman, 39. She didn't have any comorbidities, wasn't obese, didn't have diabetes, and she unfortunately died from this vaccine. Now next, let me show you how you can download this data and then put it in a spreadsheet. So if you want to download the data so you can look at it in a spreadsheet, click on Export. Okay, and then I'm going to use Google Sheets to upload this data. So I'm just going to open a Google Sheet. And you can do the same thing if you have Microsoft Excel. So we're just going to do new spreadsheet. We're going to go to File, okay, click on File, then go down to Import. Click on that. Computer's a little slow. It's working. And we're going to click Upload. Select file from your device. You can also drag it in here. So this is the file we just downloaded from the database. So replace spreadsheet. So it's a blank spreadsheet. So we're just going to have replace. If you want to do a couple different searches, then you can do insert new sheets into your existing spreadsheet. That way you'll just have different tabs. So this is a brand new spreadsheet, replace spreadsheet. I'm just going to click on import data. Oh, for separator type, detect automatically because we downloaded a text file as opposed to a spreadsheet. Convert text to numbers, dates, and formulas. Leave on yes. So import data. So now it's taking the data, it's just going to put it into rows and columns for us. All right. So now let's just clean up this data a little bit to make it a little easier to look at. Notes is blank. So we will delete this column. We don't know, this is a duplicate. So we will delete this column. Duplicate. Delete this column. Duplicate. So this tells us the vaccine right here. Moderna, Pfizer, BioNTech. We don't need the code. That's just the vaccine type. So we will delete this column. And then let's just make this adverse event description a little bigger. We'll bold the top row. And then we can actually freeze the top row. So we'll just go to freeze one row under view. This way we can scroll down and still have our headings. And we will also go to data and click on create a filter. So this way we can break it down. We can filter out just the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. We can break it down by male, female. I've known that I guess some people that maybe it's not a required field to enter the sex, but we can see, for example, of these deaths, 448, how many are female? And we'll just highlight this here. Okay, so of the 446 downloaded, or no, of the 448, 192 are females. And we can look at males. We can just highlight this. .243. So far more males have died from this than females. Can also break it down by age. So let's take out. We know a lot of elderly people have died from this, so let's take them out of the mix, and we can look at people 64 and younger. That wasn't giving, holding it in the age column didn't give me the count, so I'm just trying to get a count. So 82 below 65 of the 448. So this just gives you a good idea of who are the people dying, how are they dying. We can look at even younger people. Take out 60 to 64. This 1 to 2 year old, this is some kind of an error because it says death by suicide. I don't see how a 1 or 2 year old can get a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So that's some kind of error there. But we can see somebody between 18 and 29 passed away from this. So this was a male on day due for second dose. Patient was found unresponsive at work in the hospital. Patient pupils were fixed and dilated. Full ACLS was initiated for 55 minutes with multiple rounds of bicarb, calcium chloride, magnesium, and epinephrine. Patient was intubated. Patient continued into VFib arrest. It was shocked multiple times, I guess until they passed away. So not the most uplifting of topics, but it's important to know how to do this research. One other thing I want to show you is if you go to this HRSA website, and I'll put a link for this too, you can click on the most recent data report. So this is a PDF you can look at. And I mentioned in the beginning of this talk that $4.5 billion has been paid out for vaccine injuries and death. So there's a bunch of other data up there. This table here is interesting. These are petitions filed, but DTP, that's diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. There's been 3,287 injuries from this, 696 for death. So, for example, if you get a cut today and you go to the hospital, the recommendation is that you get a tetanus shot. Now, most hospitals, when they give you the tetanus shot, you're going to get the DTP. So, if you do decide to go that route, you might want to insist you get just a plain old tetanus shot, because there's been 3 deaths from that one compared to 696. And if you scroll to the bottom, this shows the starting in 1989, there were $1.3 million paid out to 6 different people that were injured, and it goes up to fiscal year 2021. So this has data for the first month of the year from January. And these claims, it does take a while for these to get adjudicated and go through, because they do have to go through courts, which anyone that's dealt with any kind of legal process, it takes longer than you think it's going to take. So none of these 196 are from the COVID vaccine, because it takes longer than that to get the payout. So these are just a backlog of events that happened either last year or the year before. But so far, just in January, there were 196 different awards compensated, totaling almost $73 million. So if you go over here, this is total outlays, $4.5 billion. So anyone that tells you that vaccines are safe and effective, well, they're not 100% safe, because $4.5 billion has been paid out. Some of that does include lawyer fees, but $4.14 billion has been paid out to either people that have been injured or the parents of a child that has been killed from this vaccine. So the point here is do your due diligence, because if you ask your pediatrician, hey, are there any harms to the vaccine? Most likely, most pediatricians will say no, they're completely safe. Well, then you can bring up, well, actually they're not completely safe, because 7,771 awards have been compensated for injuries. The injury was so bad, the people had to go to court. And again, this money doesn't come from the vaccine maker. This comes from every time a vaccine's administered, there's a tax on that vaccine. So these are tax dollars that are paying out these payouts. So something to be aware of. But the main thing is if these vaccines are so safe and so effective, why is it that the vaccine maker is not liable? The other thing about this COVID vaccine is it's still being researched. It's experimental. It's the first of its kind vaccine. It's an mRNA vaccine. And this is the first vaccine of its kind that's been used on humans. They're saying once you get the vaccine, you still have to wear a mask. You still have to social distance. And if you're 64 and younger, if you're under 65, you have a 99.9% chance of recovery. If you're, I think it's 20 and younger, you have like a 99.997 chance of fully recovering from this virus. So not too many kids are getting the vaccine now, but at some point they will be giving it to kids. With that kind of survivability rate, I would think long and hard as a parent before giving my child that vaccine. A few other points. India has completely banned this Pfizer vaccine. India has had some bad experiences with big pharma and also big agriculture. So Monsanto came in and did a number on India, but there's been a ton of vaccine injuries in India. A lot from some guy who founded Microsoft. His foundation has really funded a lot of these things. But some doctors are saying about this new COVID vaccine, it's an mRNA vaccine. It can change your DNA. When we do this to a plant, it's called a GMO, a genetically modified organism. So are people that have received this vaccine a genetically modified organism? I don't know. I just know what I've heard some doctors say. I've seen presentations both pro and against this vaccine, and some of the pro presentations I've seen have been pretty compelling. They make it sound really good. But if it's so good, why have there been 448 deaths in the U.S.? There's been more around the world so far. So just some questions that we need to ask. We also know from the miscarriages, I think we found 6 miscarriages. Not a good idea to take if you're pregnant, and some doctors are speculating that it could potentially impact fertility down the road. So if you want to start a family, that's something else to consider. I don't know if it will impact fertility or not, but again, you want to be aware of these things because most of the doctors administering these vaccines aren't going to know this information. So I hope you found this valuable, and just some things to keep in mind. Always do your own research. Always do your own due diligence. Don't take my word for it. Go into this database. Do your own search on the database. Discover for yourself.